was accidentally a UFO over Shelley Vern's lawn. She was on her way out to her car, a tiny gray hazard that she called a punch bug, with an armful of makeup and beauty products. I guess I was pretty conspicuous, because she only made it about 2 steps from the door before she dropped all of it. Everything spilled onto the driveway with a truly beautiful popcorn-like clattering noise, half of it rolling out into the street as the screen door hissed shut behind her. Her shadow was a giant leering at the house, apparently cast by me. Judging by the pulsing contrast of it against the egg-white siding, I must have been obscenely bright. Given that it was a sunny afternoon, this was doubly impressive. Her eyes weren't bothered, though. Shock had made them enormous, unblinking, glimmering brown. She backpedaled without moving them and fell into the screen door.
"Gary!"
she gasped.
"Gary, get out here! There's a UFO!"
A muffled voice rasped from inside.
"Horse's ass!"
Shelley either didn't hear that comment or didn't care. Despite it, a curtain moved in the window and a stubbled face peered out. Shelley slowly got back to her feet, feeling her way up against the door. Frizzy, oak-colored hair billowed around her head, as if my presence had kicked up a wind. Gary's face seemed to teleport from the window to the door, he moved so fast. He staggered outside and threw the screen door out of his way and nearly knocked Shelley over with it. She stumbled, but barely noticed her stumbling. I watched them watching me, possibly more stunned than they were, though nothing about them appeared stunning. Shelley, mid-sized in all respects, in her mid-30s with a bronze summer tan, and Gary, taller and thicker and slightly older, unkempt curls of brown draped over his head, and a general shape of neglect that I learned much later was called dad bod. These were 2 totally average-looking people staring at me. Then their neighbor burst out of his little red house and joined in the staring. He was a short, middle-aged guy with a halo of graying hair and a patchy beard. His shirt glittered with blue sequins, quite a flamboyant contrast to his beige shorts. I was on the verge of panic. This was against the rules. Nobody was supposed to see me. But now I was the most exciting thing in the history of the neighborhood. I had about 7 seconds to get it together before somebody thought to pull their phone out and make me viral. I was trying to become a tree. That's what caused all this. In the middle of Shelley Vern's lawn was an average American tree. I couldn't tell you what kind. I haven't looked up names for all the earth trees. But it looked, to me, just like the millions of other trees blanketing this country, which I had learned was Earth's leading nation, culturally and economically. I wanted to see what ordinary looked like for the dominant human tribe. Not for science, not for diplomacy. I just got bored. And in my part of the galaxy, Earth and humans are a hot topic. I decided that the best way to see what all the fuss was about was to live as a tree for a while. At the time, it seemed like the lesser of 2 evils. I could either choke on the whole charcuterie of Earth life by being human, or I could take a small, measured bite and be human adjacent. Not everyone on my planet is as measured as I. A friend of mine built himself a human body and dove right into it. Said body died young because said friend made stupid decisions. But as soon as his consciousness left his meat suit, he woke up at home and battered me with several of his human memories. Even vicarious experiences are pretty intense where I come from. That's the price of being a telepathic species. No filters, no boundaries, no privacy. So when my buddy told me about his childhood detonating fart bombs in his school lunchroom, I had to smell them. I felt the sting of mashed potatoes flying into my eye as retribution. I tasted blood when he jumped off the roof at age 9, thankfully only 1 story high, and caught his chin on the metal edge of a trampoline. And when he took his crotch rocket onto the highway and bobbed and weaved through traffic at 120 miles per hour with no helmet or protective gear, I got to experience his death by tractor-trailer in ultra resolution. Thankfully, he, and now we, didn't feel much, but it was still traumatic. Traumatic for me. My friend, call him Gleegorb if you want. We don't have names in our society, but Gleegorb sounds like something a human would call an alien. Was unfazed. He thought the whole experience was wicked. I remember us floating above Earth's moon, admiring the green-blue jewelry of the planet. Gleegorb was whipping his tentacles around in excitement. A human would say that he looked like an octopus in a glass helmet and a chrome, 8-limbed spacesuit. This is a common form to take on my planet. It's practical and low maintenance. But it isn't how we naturally evolved. I don't know what our natural forms looked like. That's ancient history. Anyway, he kept shouting at me. "Get down there," he would say. "Do it with me! Do it with me one time!" I use words like say and shout loosely, mind you, since this was still telepathic conversation. I received emotional impressions from him, instant and unmistakable, which can be carefully translated into words for beings who are trapped by the primitive shackles of language, like humans. And I, thanks to Gleegorb and his psychic battering ram, have learned more human words and phrases than I would ever have liked to know. "It just seems like too much," I told him. "Those people are crazy." "Crazy is why it's fun!" he giggled, looping over me and spinning so that his tentacles blurred into a ring. "You've never felt emotions like human emotions, dude, I promise you." I believed him. I could feel the memory of human emotion emanating from him. His persistence itself, this peer pressure going on here, came from human influence. "I bet," I said, "but it just seems like too much." "Ugh, what if you just went and looked? Just watch for a while." "I can watch fine from here." A tentacle smacked my helmet and left a splatter of suction cup goo. "Don't talk out your ass," he said. I didn't know what an ass was at that moment, but at his psychic mention of it, I quickly learned. I cut off the disgusting stream of thoughts and images that resulted. "You can't see anything from up here," he went on. "I mean, it's beautiful and everything. It really is a gorgeous-looking planet. But you can't imagine what it's like to be down there. You just can't. I could feed you more of my experiences, but it's just not the same as making your own. And your experiences aren't very encouraging." "God damn it! How about a plant? Humans love plants. They keep them around. Plants are quiet and peaceful. They don't do anything. You'd love being a plant." He radiated an image of what I now know to be a tree, wind strumming its leaves under a golden sun. It was pretty entrancing, I admit. It looked easy. That bright, warm sunlight was seductive. They've got a great sun, these humans. They don't know how good it is. Not like the dinky, dim red dwarfs that dot most of our empire. I wondered what it would be like to feed off of light like that. It had to be delicious. Invigorating. Probably how those earth trees get so big. We've seen plenty of plants on other worlds, my people. Shrubbery, grasslands, etc. But most of the stars are too dim to feed anything so magnificent as a forest. "You're thinking about it!" my friend cackled, sensing my temptation. "Yes," I admitted, fidgeting with two of my own tentacles. "But just the plant, the tree. Don't get victorious over there." Gleegorb laughed and did flips. "Just the tree!" "You say that now," he giggled. "Don't push it, or I won't go at all." "You ass," I added, enjoying the new insult. Okay. Gleegorb sobered up. "Alright, just go be a tree and watch. Observe the people. I'm gonna go be a human again. We'll meet back here when we're finished. Sound good?" He was flying before I could respond. I chased him down into the darkness of one of the moon craters, and we went into deep meditations, pushing our bodies into suspended animation. We rode waves of tingling relaxation until they became numbness, and our souls left our bodies. Without the limitations of the body's senses, we could see everything. All possibilities were equally real, each as accessible as another. In this natural place, this super real horizon beyond space and time, we could make worlds. Humans would call us gods. That's when I thought of Shelley Verne. I couldn't tell you why, because there is no why. When you swim in eternity, you get what you're looking for, even if you don't know you're looking for it. I was looking, more or less, for normalcy in America. Nothing too wild or extreme. The result was evidently Shelley. Having looked for her and thought of her, she was real. And so was her neighborhood and her lawn and her tree. I should have focused on the tree. But all the sudden colors and vibrations of the neighborhood were overwhelming, beautiful and terrifying. So I couldn't focus on anything. I was just soaking it all up, trying to see everything at once. And then her door opened and she walked out, clutching her lipstick and mascara and all her containers. Gleegorb was long gone. I hadn't even noticed losing him. It was just me, my disembodied spirit blazing like heaven over Shelley Verne's lawn and making a scene. The guy in the sequin shirt wandered over and stood with Shelley and Gary, all craning their necks and making visors of their hands. Other doors began to open and new neighbors streamed out. "Ass!" I screamed to myself. A chorus of oohs swelled from the crowd as their shadows briefly jumped. It seemed my curse had caused a surge in my brightness. I was making it worse. In desperation, I forced myself to look at the tree and nothing else. All the veins and all the leaves were visible, thanks to the shimmering beacon I had become. I concentrated on them, stretched out my life force to them. My consciousness flowed like blood through those veins and pumped its way through the branches and to the trunk of the tree. It was working. Somebody shouted, "It's fading!" Suddenly, like falling out of bed, I was awake again, in space-time. A light breeze massaged my leaves. About a dozen people were standing at the edge of Shelley's driveway, looking just above me, then at each other. I could see no obnoxious light, no second sun. It worked. I was a tree. But what had I done? "It was an orb," said one of the neighbors in the street. "One of those orb UAPs." "I didn't pee," someone argued. "I've read about them. There are orbs with the saucers sometimes. Orbs fly around with the discs." "It was Mary," said another. "I saw the face of the Virgin in that light." One neighbor scoffed. Another nodded in serene agreement. As a tree, I had access to a lot of information. An internet of roots teemed under trunk. I was logged in as much as the grass was. I could hear and see through every blade, though it somehow wasn't hearing or seeing. It was like what humans call gut feelings, only more vivid. The thousands of insects crawling in the lawn itched, but there was no need to scratch. The sun was warm, but warm versus cold felt more like soft versus hard in human terms. Look, it's hard to compare tree experiences to human experiences, especially when I only know human experiences through telepathic memories that my octopus friend shoved down my throat. The point is, the voices and murmurs, and even the breathing of the crowd around Shelley's yard made as much sense to me as direct conversation. Actual direct conversation was therefore so rich with data that it was almost overwhelming. My leaves and the grass absorbed emotional/biochemical signals from the crowd as naturally as sunlight. From all this, I could tell that Shelley's awe at seeing me had soured. She didn't like unusual things. Now she wanted to pretend it never happened. She crossed her arms and leaned against the screen door. Gary was the yin to her yang. "It's not what any of you think," he cried, coming down the driveway with arms outstretched, reaching for where I'd been. "Whatever you think this was, it's worse." "Well, it can't really be aliens," said the guy with the sequins. Gary spun on him, grinning. "Exactly my point, Donald. Exactly my point. Thank you." Gary blew Donald kisses across the lawn. My point, Donald said, putting a hand on his sequined heart, is that no alien would find you interesting enough to visit. You or your lawn or your overgrown tree. Now with the tree? Gary squawked, more shocked by what Donald had said than anything that had happened. You're going to beat that dead horse now? Wake up! I'll stop beating when you start trimming. Look at these branches. Look! Donald jogged to his side of the yard and grabbed one of my low-hanging leaves. I could feel the lines of his fingerprints. They're coming over the property line. I don't see any lines. That's because they're invisible. Then how am I supposed to see them? Landmarks, Gary! You want a dead horse? Gallop your ass over here and let me show you yet again. Donald pointed at a small slope that ran down next to Shelley's house. One of my roots peeked out at the trough of it, buff and gnarled, and at the thickest points beefier than Donald's legs. The root. The root of your hideous eye pollutant of a tree marks the property line. He shook my branch again. You see these leaves coming over that line? Gary laughed helplessly and turned to the crowd for assistance. Does anyone really care about leaves right now? No answer. I'm trying to tell you all what really just happened, and it sure as hell ain't anything as pretty as aliens, or the Virgin Mary, or your orbs. So what is it? Someone barked. Oh, don't encourage him, Donald barked back, shaking my leafy branch in the general direction of the crowd. Ignoring Donald, Gary put his hands up like a mime. 2 words. At the first word, he closed his left hand into a fist, and at the second, his right. Remote viewing. A member of the crowd walked away. Another one followed. Okay, Shelley announced, bending low and plucking her scattered beauty products from the pavement. I think that's the right idea. Why don't we all disperse, please? She darted around the driveway as she spoke, her fingers snatching makeup like a feeding chicken. Go on, she hollered over hunched shoulders. This isn't an alien landing site. This is a private residence. This isn't Roswell. My driveway is not a UFO highway. Shoo! Shoo, flies! The crowd did as they were told. One of them, an old grandma in a sun hat, picked up some of the lipstick containers that had rolled into the road and brought them over to Shelley. Sheeple! Gary shouted at their backs. You all better wake up soon, or you're gonna wake up when it's too late! The deep state is running all kinds of programs that would make your hairs stand up. They know all about the secret powers of the mind. Now they're turning their psychic sights on our neighborhood. Donald made sheep noises at Gary. Bah, conspiracy wacko, he said in a sheep voice. Bah. Go home, Donald, Gary snapped. Go practice your gargling. You wouldn't know a gargle if you were choking, Donald sent back. I'm an avant-garde vocalist. There's another dead horse for you. Shall we beat this one again, too? Donald became a horse now and neighed at his neighbor. God almighty, Gary whimpered, rubbing his face. Whatever you want to tell yourself. Actually, no. You know what? I'll trim my tree when you stop doing your avant-garde routine at the ass crack of dawn. Is that a deal? I don't want to have to listen to your screaming and moaning and gurgling anymore. It's avant-garde, Donald corrected before neighing some more. Or at least learn to close your windows, Gary went on. It's like waking up to a goddamn rooster around this place. Shelley had collected all her stuff by this point, and the nice old lady was walking off. She turned and yelled to Gary over Donald's bleeding. Okay, Gary. Okay! Hey! What? Gary whirled around. Honey, what? With her arms full, Shelley jerked her head in the direction of the house. Come on! Show's over. Quit provoking poor Donald. Gary sputtered. Poor? He's the poor one? Donald purred like a house cat, smiling warmly at Shelley. Just stop. Open the door for me, please. You two have beaten enough horses for one day. Gary threw his hands in the air and went to the door and held it open for his wife. He followed her inside, and Donald's voice followed him, mooing like a cow. After a moment, the screen door shut. Donald mooed for another second or two, and then sauntered back to his house and went in. The neighborhood was once again as quiet as I had found it. Streetlights made nighttime feel like a softer dusk. 2 mother bats brought their pups to roost in my upper branches. Mother A's pups were old enough to start flying and hunting with her, albeit clumsily. Mother B, on the other hand, had to leave her pups with me while she hunted. I was oddly touched. What a display of trust. I don't know if it was the tree that felt these emotions or if it was the real me, but it didn't matter. I was invested now. I was like a grandma taking the kids for a slumber party. The echolocation of countless bats wafted through the suburbs. I gather humans can't hear it, which is too bad. It was a symphony, but frenetic, hyper-paced, like musical strobe lights. Between that and the songs of crickets and other insects, the night was almost louder, as far as we trees were concerned, than the day. The pups didn't move much. They hunkered into a little nest in my upper bark and waited. Mom stayed close to begin with. She gobbled swaths of mosquitoes and even caught a couple moths, of which I could tell a good 20 had made me their home base for the night, when they weren't hopelessly bombarding streetlights or glowing windows. But eventually the drift of Mom's sonar brought her to a few neighbor trees, and then even further down the road, until I finally lost track of her. A number of other bats flitted around my leafy head. I didn't know if they cared about Mother A's pups or were part of some community with her. They made no indication of it if they were. The pups were ignored or unrealized. An opossum came sniffing around my roots. It dug its claws into my trunk and climbed a few feet. I didn't like it. With each twitch of its pink little nostrils, it inched higher, closer to the pups. They didn't know there was danger. They didn't know the possum was there, let alone that it would eat them. Opossums, I researched much later, feed opportunistically and are not very picky. I wanted to shake it off me, but I had no muscles. Trees cannot act directly upon the world. Trees are observers. Observation requires a kind of non-attachment. I was emotionally attached to these baby bats. I was not a good tree. So I just stood helplessly, as any tree does. I could only watch, feel the claws in my bark scratching closer and closer to those pups. Then a fox came padding up the lawn. Asses above! What kind of night was this? The fox broke into a run and then leaped up my trunk, within nipping distance of the opossum's tail. And nip he did. The opossum hissed and fled to the other side of my trunk. The fox chased. They danced around my trunk in a downward spiral until they were in the grass. The opossum tried to flee into some bushes, but it didn't make it. The fox caught it in the middle of the lawn and bit its throat out. Remember, I had chosen to be a suburban tree because I thought it would be uneventful and bloodless. At that point, Mom had come back to check on her pups. Maybe she sensed the opossum somehow, or the fox hunting it. I don't know. Regardless, I was relieved, as grandmothers are after a night of babysitting. The mother bat fed her young as the fox trotted down the road, dragging the mangled possum carcass by the tail. Morning arrived with shrieks and rapid-fire, phlegmy stuttering from Donald's open window. From the Vern's open windows, I heard violent proclamations. We're barely awake. Gary's voice.
Barely. I was just beginning to remember what coffee was. 5 minutes sooner and he would have woken us. I'm going over there to break his skull.
Calm down, Shelley sighed.
How can you be calm?
Because it's not that loud. Not all the way over here.
You're not hearing this?
Gary yelled, much more loudly than Donald's ululating. I mean, yeah, I hear it, but it's not, like, oppressive.
Jesus! Maybe you like it. You want me to start clicking at you in the morning? Like a cricket? Would that turn you on?
Whatever.
The fuck's that mean? Don't just roll over.
Just go be angry, Gary. Go yell at Donald if it makes you happy.
Happy? You think being angry makes me happy?
Yeah. I heard fuming. I heard breathy attempts to articulate thoughts, to fire verbal artillery. But no words were formed. In a way, this struggle didn't sound totally unlike what Donald was doing. After a minute, a door slammed. After 5, Shelley's front door opened, and Gary stomped out. He stormed across his lawn and stumbled over some of my roots, which made him even more furious. As this was going on, Donald's routine became chant-like. There were high-pitched squeals dotted with guttural growls that seemed to build tension, as if he were performing a soundtrack to Gary's approach. Gary pounded on Donald's door.
Hey! Get the fuck out here! I'm gonna rip those vocal cords out once and for all!
Donald came to the window and gasped, then proceeded to make sheep noises.
Get the fuck out here!
Gary screamed, waking the rest of the neighborhood.
I'm sick of this!
Donald replied. They went back and forth until Gary got tired of yelling and went back home for coffee. Donald practiced a few more minutes of gurgling and then was finally quiet. A jogger went by. The morning was blue and calm. For the first time, I noticed the crisp feeling of dew on my leaves. It was beautiful. Not much later, Shelley came out of the house lugging all her makeup again. This time she had it in a bag. She carried it into her tiny car and rolled the window down. The breeze came in and brushed her locks of frizz. Gary's massive red pickup loomed at her passenger side. The 2 cars next to each other made me think of a parent with its young, some large mammal creatures in the wild. Shelley set her phone up on the dash and started doing her makeup in the rearview mirror. Well, my dear subscribers, she was saying, welcome to another episode of Pretty in a Punch Bug. It is a beautiful Saturday morning out here. Golden hour. Look at those rays. Perfect opportunity to highlight the natural symmetry of the face. All faces. This isn't just a me thing. You should never waste a good golden hour. It's an opportunity to see what you really look like. She paused to apply some mascara. It's easy to forget when we live in such polluted lighting all the time. It almost feels like the world is trying to make us feel uglier than we really are. 2 squirrels chased each other through my foliage, fighting over a nut. Their angry chattering reminded me of Gary and Donald. Well, today we're going to talk about blush, Shelley continued. How it can be a secret sauce to accentuate the beauty you already have. She began her spiel, but I detected little enthusiasm. Her biochemical signature, as far as a tree could read it, could we call it her emotional scent, for lack of a better phrase, indicated to me that she used to be far more passionate about this project. What was happening now was a routine jiggling of stale pleasure neurons and other synaptic wiring. Never forget, she said at the end of her stream, makeup is all about self-expression, not beautification. It's about presenting you to the world. It's about being and doing you. There's a part of you that gets lost in the hustle and bustle that forgets you're an individual. Customizing your appearance is about taking back your originality. If you're doing it to satisfy someone else, then don't bother. Shelley got out of her punch bug. On her way across the driveway, she stopped and looked at me. It was an odd look, with an odd emotional smell. Almost like she was seeing me for the first time. She stepped closer and threw her makeup bag over her shoulder and hooked 2 fingers over the handle. With her free hand, she pushed at my bark, testing its sturdiness. She looked at her palm and wiped it on her jeans. What you looking at? Gary called from the door. Shelley jumped.
Jesus Christ!
Gary laughed. He stood in the house behind the screen and chewed a bagel. Shelley didn't turn around. She kept studying me. What does it look like I'm looking at? Gary swallowed. Did you talk about the UFO on your show? Shelley pressed her lips together. Why would I talk about that? Gary took another bite of his bagel and talked through it. Might get you more viewers. You're always whining you don't get viewers. I'm not turning my channel into some conspiracy theory thing. Alright, why are you so negative about this? You ran everyone off in the driveway yesterday. You saw what I saw, didn't you? Shelley didn't answer. My leaves made dancing shadows on the purple t-shirt she was wearing. The words, "Love what you are," were stamped across the chest in bold red. Shelley traced her finger along the font, following my shadows with it. Hello? Gary called. Yes, Gary, I saw your UFO. Well, then doesn't that prove everything I've been saying? Shelley laughed. UFO stands for Unidentified Flying Object. That means unidentified. How does something unidentified prove that the world is run by a secret society which is run by reptiles? Gary scoffed, insulted. They're reptilians, first of all. And they're in disguise. They shapeshift, and then they take over government office. Do you not listen to a word I tell you? Okay. Don't okay me! Gary fumed. Golly damn, I was just trying to be helpful. Gary tromped into the depths of the house. Shelley looked at me another moment, then went inside. The mother bat dropped her pups off with me again, even though I failed to prevent them being devoured. They were alive and uneaten, thanks only to their would-be eater being eaten. Either Mom didn't know the whole story after all, or she figured bad luck stays on the move. As usual, Mother's intuition won out. There was no catastrophe. I did see a fox wander by on the road, but he kept his head down and didn't look my way. Mom made short work of her hunt and then came back for the kids. They all hung out in my canopy for a while, and then, to my shock, I saw the little black smudges of the pups crawl to the edge of one of my branches and jump off. They spread young wings and flapped in desperation. For a heart-stopping second, they just dropped. But about halfway down, they leveled out. Mom was a dart of encouragement, circling, nudging one and then the other skyward. In a minute, the three of them had risen above the branch they'd leapt from. If I'd had tear ducts, I would have cried. If I'd had hands, I would have clapped. The three bats enjoyed a brief family flutter under a pale full moon, and finally settled into my shelter for an early night. Shelley left the house early, when the morning mist had just cleared away, and the last particles of dew were fading. Donald hadn't even started his routine yet. She took Gary's giant truck rather than her punch bug. Donald did start up shortly after that. This time he screamed like a banshee, then cackled like a hyena. He alternated between these noises with a curious rhythm, with an interval between each phase in which it sounded like he was spitting as fiercely as he could. There was no protest from Gary, even though I thought this routine was louder and more gross than the last one. Within an hour or so, Shelley came back with several bags of mulch in the bed of the truck. The garage door opened and Shelley got out of the truck and went into the garage. She came out again with a dirty apron and a pair of gloves, and then opened the bed of the truck and yanked one of the bags until it came out. She let the other end of it drop out of the truck and plop onto the driveway, and then she dragged it into the lawn. She brought it to me and set it down by my trunk, like some kind of offering. I realized when she tore open the bag and squatted down and began spreading the mulch at my roots that it was, in fact, for me. I was flabbergasted. Was this art? Was she turning me into art? Her emotional signals reflected a kind of inspired state, an urge to beautify that wasn't unlike creativity. For that matter, it wasn't unlike her makeup thing either. her cherished self-expression. The emotions were almost identical to the ones I'd felt, or smelled, wafting from her car when she was doing her show. My own emotions were so overwhelming that my spirit almost fell out of the tree, which would have been the last thing Shelley needed. Another UFO over her lawn. It was also what humans would call a light bulb moment. This, it dawned on me, was why everyone in the galaxy found Earth life so appealing. I had found the jewel hidden in the morass of human craziness. A small piece of it lived in the souls of other Earth beings too. I saw it in a mother bat's first flight with her children, and I felt it now in Shelley's casual raising of my dignity through mulch. It was a miracle. A planet filled with beings trapped in their own minds, who can never directly touch the consciousnesses of their fellow Earthlings. But they are still capable of selflessness. They can still give to each other and have nothing given back, and will do so expecting nothing. It must be an insane rush to care for someone you don't have a direct psychic connection with. What a hazard! What an exhilarating risk! All this was barely anything to Shelley. It was a weekend whim. She could shrug about it. I watched her, frizzy hair falling down behind her ears and curling over her jawline, cheeks reddened by effort, a frown and a scowl of concentration. The sun had just crawled over the one-story house across the street, and its rays spilled out like a tide, flowing just low enough to miss my leaves and just high enough to envelop Shelley. She was bathed in her golden hour. I watched her work and loved her. Donald came out of his house and wandered over. He crossed his arms and stood a few feet behind Shelley. His sequins this time were golden. Shelley worked for a few minutes without acknowledging him. When he didn't budge, she glanced up. "Hi, Donald." "Hi yourself," he muttered. He still didn't move. Shelley squinted one eye at him. "It's hard to look at you when you're sparkling like that," she said. Standing directly in the sunlight, his sequins threw blinding flashes every time he breathed. "Sorry," he said, not moving. "Is there something I can help you with?" "Well," he sighed, "I'm just feeling a bit betrayed is all." Shelley took a new hunk of mulch and flattened it out. "Betrayed, huh?" "Yes. I thought you understood me, Shelley. I thought you got me. I thought we had a kind of kinship." "I don't follow." "Well, you're stuck married to that Sasquatch hunting nutcase, and I'm stuck living next to him." Shelley laughed. "And that means we have a kinship?" "Nothing forges a bond like shared misery." She said, pounding at the mulch. "Aren't you wondering what all this has to do with betrayal?" Shelley leaned back on her heels. "What does all this have to do with betrayal, Donald?" "Well, you see, your husband and I have projected our mutual animosities onto the most readily available shared object in our mutual space." "What?" Finally, Donald moved, throwing his arms at me. The jostling of his shirt made a disco light show all over the lawn and the house. "The tree! This tree is our biggest issue, and now I see you tending to it. You're caring for it, and not in the way I've been asking you to for all these years." "Oh," Shelley said, taking off her gloves. "Oh? All you have to say to me is, oh? I thought you had my back, Shelley." "Well, I don't know where you got that idea." "So you're taking his side?" Shelley stood up and untied her apron. "I'm not taking sides. I just wanted to do a little yard work." "On your accursed tree!" "Look, man," Shelley sighed. "I'm working at the root of this accursed tree, all right? The trunk. This clearly does not infringe upon your precious property line, which I might point out you have crossed just now." Donald curled his lips. His right nostril twitched. "You have no idea what kind of enemy you've just created." Shelley opened her mouth to respond to that, but Donald threw back his head and made a long, groaning squeal, as if he was suddenly under the cross of an exorcist. He bunched his shoulders up by his neck and spread his arms out stiffly at his sides and waddled back to his house like that, making demon noises the whole way. Shelley watched him go, No expression on her face whatsoever. I couldn't smell any particular emotions on her either. Only general resignation. She turned and went into the garage without a word. I noticed then that Gary had been watching through the screen door. He was grinning. The blades of the chainsaw were like molten teeth chewing me. The sun had just begun to set and make art of the sky. There was a brilliant orange streak of cloud that would have been beautiful if it didn't remind me of the burning feelings in the stumps of my amputated branches. Donald wielded the chainsaw. He'd come running out with it over his head, gargling and yelling like some demented horror movie killer. His shirt sequins were black, and he wore black pants and black boots with a black beanie on his head. He cut off my branches that had crossed his property line, and then he kept cutting. He hopped around in a circle around my trunk, waving his chainsaw like a toy. Pieces of me were crashing down in a deathly circle, leaves flying over the lawn like autumn. Gary and Shelley burst out of the house. Gary was about as red and sweaty as I would have expected, but before he could launch into one of his tirades, Shelley stomped across the lawn with such fury that Gary actually jumped ahead and held her back, so that she wouldn't be disemboweled.
Are you fucking kidding?
She screamed.
This is our tree, you crazy balding fuck! Get off our property!
Donald spun and held the chainsaw out in front of him and let it growl. Stay back, he said.
You motherfucker!
Shelley seethed, flinging her hair back. Tears of rage shined on her cheeks. Gary looped his arms under her shoulders and dragged her back. Jesus, honey, look out, he kept saying. Look out! Shelley's sudden emotional investment in me was moving. Don't get me wrong about that. But I was in too much agony to be sentimental. Internally, I was wailing, barely coherent. Maybe Donald would have stopped if he could have heard it. Or maybe not. My senses weren't clear enough at the time to smell his emotions, and he was clearly deranged. Stay back, he said again, brandishing the humming blades. You left me no choice. Don, you are... Gary began, pausing to heft a thrashing Shelley. Fucking certifiable. You don't put that thing away, I am calling the police. Call them, he said, raising the saw. Go ahead, call. I'll go down with a conscience. I'll know I stood against injustice. What did you ever stand for? Either of you. Living your empty, meaningless lives. And then you turn against me. You try to turn the whole neighborhood against me. By this point, I just barely noticed. Several of the other neighbors had come out to see what was going on. Right on cue. You have no right, Shelley cried. You have no right to hurt our tree. You have no right! She squirmed in Gary's arms. Last warning, Gary said. Off our property now. Not yet. He revved the chainsaw, then imitated the sound of it, dripping spittle down his chin. Not yet. Not until I get what I came here for. You got your branches cut, Gary argued. What more do you want? I'm not talking to you, Donald said, pointing the end of the saw. I'm talking to her. He pointed the blade at Shelley and made another chainsaw noise with his mouth. What? She raged. What is it? What do you want? What do you want? Let go of me! She snapped at Gary. I want an apology, he sniffed. And an oath of allegiance. Shelley laughed wildly. You want an apology? Come get it. Put down your tool and let me give you one. Donald shook his head. Last chance. I'll let you try again. Shelley laughed again. Eat shit! All I'll give you is a foot in your ass! You're the human version of the liquid that farts out of a ketchup bottle! Nope, Donald said. Wrong answer. As he spoke, he turned and swung the chainsaw into my trunk. The growl of the blades sputtered and spat chips of wood in all directions. Shelley screamed. I screamed. I felt my physical essence being cut away. For a human, this would probably feel like being strapped to an operating table and having your beating heart sawed in half. There was a moment of initial, world-shattering pain and then delirium. Shock blew my soul out of the tree, and I found myself hovering over Shelley's lawn again. An upswell of gasps and murmurs rippled through the crowd. Donald stopped sawing and gawked up at me. Shelley grew calm and still and slumped down in the grass. She and Gary watched. I looked back at Shelley and felt only love. I felt the love that humans feel, that dangerous, vulnerable, insane love. I tried to send it to her. I thought a psychic wave of it in her direction. The last thing I saw on Earth was her smile. Eternity being what it is, I found myself back on the moon with Gleegorb instantly. I only experienced a weekend on Earth, while he experienced a lifetime. But we met each other here in an equal now. Our experiences bled into each other. We were fully telepathic again, and could hide nothing. My soul was still colored by Shelley and the pain of chainsaw dismemberment. I was love and agony. Gleegorb noted this and laughed.